Okay, y'all, welcome back. I saw this video from Ash Callahan's channel, and I wanted to touch on the subject matter that she discussed because not only do I have a parasocial relationship with her content, but it kind of put something into words that I've felt but I haven't had the words for myself. So let's watch this.
In Edward Bullough's 1912 paper on psychical distance as a factor in art and aesthetic principle, he argues that aesthetic experience depends on distance between the perceiver and the perceived. Where self-interest dominates, the perceived is apprehended instrumentally rather than aesthetically. Bullough illustrates this with experiencing a fog at sea. Being a pirate on a boat in a storm with little distance to the object of perception is going to elicit a very different comprehension of the situation than me on my phone scrolling pictures of pirates. The distance allows the object to be aesthetically evaluated, as there is no impending doom elicited by the closeness, both in physical distance to the object, but also in psychical distance to self-interest. You are thinking a lot more about yourself in this situation than you are in this situation. With reference to the distinction between fashion influencer and non-fashion influencer, but still creatively inclined figures such as Matty Matheson, the fashion influencer exists in the storm with too much attention paid to algorithmic novelty and commercial incentives, reducing aesthetic distance by placing us, as the consumer, in too close proximity as fashion as a strategy or content, as opposed to Matty, who, whilst having this proximity to food, does not to fashion. His content is not organised around fashion as a primary communicative or economic anchor, which is what Bullough would describe as a psychical distance between him and fashion, and also between us as the consumer of his content for fashion purposes, because we are not the intended audience or the subject of his marketing, as we are not consuming his content for food in this exercise. His status of being a chef introduces a distance that fashion influencers lack, that allows us as the consumer to experience a more authentic sense of fashion, as it is interpreted as lived and temporally stable, rather than optimized and perpetually revised for the demands of visibility.
In case you weren't following what she was saying about Edward Bullough's research on psychical distance, I'll break it down for you, chat. I'll break it down for you. So psychical distance is essentially the ability to best observe something aesthetically because you have little to no relation to it. Now, while her videos in the context of fashion inspiration, where to look for it and how the best place to look for it is in people or things unrelated or psychical distance from fashion. Psychically distance from fashion. Jesus Christ. This video will essentially revolve around how I put distancing myself psychically, see, I got it that time, into practice in relation to design. Now, while I wish I could distance myself from design in the most literal fashion, I'm afraid that's next to impossible. There's literally no way. I'd have to undo 4 years of higher education on the subject in order to achieve that. However, what I try to put into practice is something adjacent, and it's finding design in the mundane or ordinary, but simply put, finding design in life, period. When people ask me, hey, how was design school? What was that like? How was art school in general? This, that, and the third. I often tell them, time and time again, that one of the most important things that I learned was to study everything outside of design as much as you possibly can. Obviously, that takes away time from studying basic design principles and literal cornerstones of what design is and how to be good at it, quote unquote good. So that's not to say that you shouldn't study design at all. Obviously, you need to have an understanding of basic principles, but where you should find the most knowledge, or specifically the most creativity, is when you either study life or look for design within it. And I know that sounds extremely cryptic, but I promise I'm going somewhere with this. Funnily enough, half of my design professors often had a background in something completely different when they were in undergrad, and they wound up some of the best designers I could have ever learned from. To give you a prime example, and ironically this wasn't a professor of mine. My professors were great though, I promise. We can look at the work of someone I actually had the pleasure of listening to in a guest lecture circa 2018. And since, I've always admired him and his work. Braulio Amato is a designer who literally creates pieces from the mundane with his series of posters promoting events for a nightclub in Brooklyn, New York called Good Room. As you can see, these posters often involve random objects or materials that he finds while he's on a daily walk, or maybe even objects that appear in the background of photos he's taking day to day. And these random objects vary from objects he's captured on his phone, just taking a photo, to literal ripped up tax documents. And the largest lesson I've learned from him is thinking outside the box can be very arduous, so why not let your 1099 envelopes from the IRS do the thinking for you? Now, while this is an example of studying life in the most literal sense I can think of, I do believe Braulio practices psychical distancing by removing himself from designing in the classical sense, and instead playing with an object's color or shape or texture to quickly conjure unique compositions that probably wouldn't be achieved otherwise. I apologize because I'm being very wordy, but what I'm trying to say is this man breaks quite a few design rules. And he's using random objects and like sometimes literal garbage in order to do so. Now, while he and I can't undo us being designers without suffering from some form of amnesia, we can at least distance ourselves from design in the most formal sense by altering the way we practice. And I think this is something that I've been purposely trying to do. I find myself literally taking photos of anything that I find aesthetically pleasing. I feel like some people, or most people actually do this. I look at my friends' camera rolls and sometimes they're like, sorry, they'll be scrolling looking for a specific picture and they're like, sorry, I took a photo of this like dog I saw. Earlier this year, I found myself looking at more polished and I guess complete design works in order to gain inspiration for the flyers I was making. And to my disdain, I think it stunted the level of enjoyment that I felt after completing a project. Recently, I realized that I had a lot more fun when I was making parodies of things that already exist, whether it's Nesquik labels, cereal boxes, retro TV print ads, you name it. I felt like I wanted to go back to having that much fun, and as long as I could justify the nonsense, like, no one's stopping me. This feeling of being in kind of a creative rut probably stemmed from being paid to do the work. Now, that's not to say that I don't approach my commissions in a creative mindset. I think there's literally just things that clients want, and sometimes my favorite idea or what I can put the most passion behind just isn't what they're looking for. And it's funny, right? I felt like there was one day I just woke up and was self-centeredly scrolling through my Instagram feed, like my own grid, and just saw this gap of like maybe 3 to 6 images where I was like, while these are nice, like they look great, they're really not that exciting to me. Like I'd probably just scroll past them. That's not to say that the work wasn't good. It's just to say that it's not work that I was excited about at the time, I don't think. And it's very funny to me that I can see the gap between like just these bursts of inspiration. I think when I have it most, it appears in like really bold, just popping colors or imagery that's aesthetically pleasing in a design sense, but it isn't taking itself seriously at all, especially with how it's conveying or delivering information to someone. But yeah, essentially my TLDR for this video is go out and live life, dude. Capture life. Get inspiration from life. Get inspiration from the mundane. Take a photo of that random ass ring or something at an antique shop. Take a photo of your neighbor's dog if it's making a really funny fucking face. Make something with it. And I mean, this isn't just in the design sense. You can psychically distance yourself from whatever it is that you have expertise or want to have expertise in by just shifting the way that you practice. If you haven't already, please go watch the rest of Ash's video. I think it's fucking brilliant. I think the example with Maddie Matheson specifically was gold. And yeah, I really appreciated the way she put it into perspective. But anyway, I have nothing else to say. Other than I just want to have more fun with my work, and capturing images of random things or things that I love or things that I just find really good looking is definitely helping. With that being said, I will catch y'all next time. Goodbye.